Hola Mario.
Hola,
Ay, ok.
¿en cuál estamos? ¿67?
Me tengo que fijar. A ver.
Sí, debe ser, porque yo no estuve ayer.
Y es 67. Ok.
¿Viste el partido?
Qué cagada.
Allande.
Jugaron terrible. La defensa no era para nada.
Y no, y ellos jugaron muy bien, los
Ujú.
belgas, que no,
Hello,
hace años que no juegan
hello,
estaban enojados.
hello, Mario.
Hello,
America was, and switch off the Zoom, do me a favor.
was Allande.
And they were outclassed. It was like a professional team playing a high school.
Love that game against Brazil. That big guy, that hot. By the way, he's pro-Israel. That
How'd that come
Holland
up? How
guy.
did that come up?
It is
And you know
Susie
who he
Saw,
looks like Moises' son.
Exempt.
Harold. Susie Saw.
Yeah.
He declared solidarity with Israel or something.
Really?
Yes,
Okay. I'm
that
from Norway.
Holland.
By the way, I
Norway,
saw.
by the way, Norway did not have any, like Sweden's got all these guys. The German team didn't have one blonde person on the German team. So
Really?
it's crazy. So
Two,
Norway doesn't allow those. I don't know. Norway didn't have
two.
these players.
No Africans? No
Yeah. Okay.
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 No,
Okay, we're on
one trick
Summit
question,
Zion.
Harold. This guy that is coming to the Lakers, Kessler,
Yeah.
is Jewish, right?
Oh, I don't know.
No, with a name like Kessler, you know.
I don't
I
know.
never heard. I never heard of the guy, and he's such a good player or
He's
something.
good. He's good. Yeah.
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 Okay. So
Yeah.
he's marrying Miss America 2025.
Oh,
Yeah.
Very smart. Oh, he's also
Mazel
smart.
tov.
Yeah. So he's 6'5" and she's like a half of him. Nice.
Okay.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, we're on Summit Zion. 67. So we say B'mayim Klal. We're talking about shrotzim. We learned that shrotzim in waters and oceans and any waters that bubble. So then you have a requirement that they have to have a fins and scales. But if you have, for example, shrotzim in kalim that germinated there and never walked on the ground, we have learned that they are not treif. And we explain like this: B'mayim klal. That's the generality. Any animal in water. Bayamim uvan chalim prat. But then it gives you a detail. It has to be oceans or rivers. B'mayim chazer v'kolal. The pasuk repeats mayim. So you have the structure of klalu pratu klal. The equation is iyatadan alakeina prat. You are marbe into the halacha those things that are similar to the detail. Ma prat meforsh mayim noivim. What is a common denominator between oceans and rivers? Because they are water that flow from a spring. I've called mayim noivim. So too, the requirement where in order to eat it has to have fins and scales is anything has flowing water. My Rabbi. So what has been included? Chritzim uniitzim liisura. These are bubbling ponds and streams that shrotzim that germinate there are also prohibited. My ate. What has been excluded from the prohibition? Boirois shichin u'ma'arois latera. These are a bore is a pit that you dig to store water. Shichin are ditches, ma'aros are caves, but that have water in them. and that if shrotzim germinate in them, according to this klal upratu klal, would be permitted. So the Gemara says, but you could learn it a different way. Oceans and rivers are waters that basically are on the ground. So maybe I've called Maim Gedalim al Gabi Karka. Maybe any water that accumulates on the ground is in the prohibition. Umay Rabbi, afilu bar sheikhlim aros. When you dig a pit or a ditch, you're also creating water flowing on the ground. So maybe that would be li'isura. Umay mi'et kelim. And perhaps the only exception to the prohibition would be shrotzim that grow in vessels. Where it says in Cain, tochlu mayahanile. It says, zos tochlu, from these you may eat, and it said from everything that's in the water. So the tochlu is coming to also extend the heter to the boira sheichrim aros. That's how this Gemara is learning. However, Dvei Rabbi Shmuel Tana differently. It says you can eat these types of things in water. He says Ein ze klal uprat. This is not learned in the form of elariba umeid. It's a different formulation of ribuy and mead. B'mayim riba. Any water, that's the general rule. By amimuvan chalim miyet, but you limited it to oceans and rivers. But then b'mayim chazav riba. Riba miyet riba, riba hakol. And my Rabbi chritzin and itzin lisura. Now you're including in the prohibition everything, including ditches and canal. Umaymid bor shichrim aros latera. But ditches, caves would be permitted. The Gemara says, maybe bor shichrim aros would be included in the prohibition. And the only miyut would be kelim. Umaymid kelim. Im kain tochlu ma'ahanilei. So we have to say no bor shichrim aros are included in the heter. Freit the Gemara ve'epochana. Maybe boirois require fins and scales, but things that have a spring don't need that. So the Gemara says, "Kidatani matisyo, the tani matisyo bar Yehuda, Mari Isla Rabbi's bor sheichrim aros leteira." Where do you see to say that any shrotzim that grow in boirish sheichim are permitted? But canals and ponds are prohibited. Maybe marbani bar shichin umaharois shenat surke kelim. Maybe they're more contained like kelim. Umotzan ichritzun itzim shenat surke, but they're not sort of self-contained. So zostachlu means just like kelim are permitted, boiroi shichin umaharois are permitted as well. Now, the other baraisa talked about a heter in a very clear way and a very unclear way. Hey sasum ve'hei mefurish. Which one was unclear and which one is clear? When it says, these you may eat, those that have, snapir kaskesses, yeshlo mefurish, that's a clear halacha. Ve'ein lo, but the pasuk that says those that don't have fins and scales, that's sasu. That's not so clear. But v'chad amar ein lo mefurish, the one that describes the fish without fins and scales, that's clear. V'yesh lo sasu. Now, what does that lead to? My time ado amar, my time ademando amar yesh lo mefurish. The one who says that the psukim that talk about the positive attribute, those that have fins and scales you may eat, armelacha minehu de komishtu kelim. Here, you can see that the permit to eat shrutzin, the germinating kalim, clearly from here, because the other ones, any other waters, require fins and scales. But my time at the mandamar aid lamafurish. The one who says that the psukim that say if it doesn't have fins and scales, that's more clear. The hayu de kamucha chahech. The imehech, if we would have learned from the other pasuk of the one that yeshlo, havamina bekalim, avagav dislin amilotech. I might think that even a fish which has fins and scales, but if they grow in kalim, I can't eat it. Ravuna. Lo lishpi ina shichra b'tzivyus be'urta. You shouldn't pour beer through a bunch of wood chips and they used to strain it to get rid of either worms or other impurities. The problem is partially tzivyosa. V'hadar nafal akasav avi oiv mishum sheretz hasheretz l'aretz. There might in a chanami be worms that germinated in the kli, which would not be prohibited. But now it crawled on the wood chip and then crawled back into the beer glass. And you'll be over eating a sheretz that crawled on the ground. Maybe the worm crawled out of the beer onto the wall of the kli and then fell back in. Maybe that's the same problem. No. The wall of the inside of the cup is part of the kli. It's not like it's on the ground. Minotemra. Where do you see this? The Tanya. That shrutzim that grow in a bore, and therefore you can just lie flat on your belly and drink directly from it. You don't have to be worried that maybe you're eating worms. You may eat anything that's in the water, even if it doesn't have fins and scales, as long as they germinated there. But the Gemara says, maybe the worm crawled onto the wall of the pit and then fell back in. Well, that's not a problem. That's considered the place that it germinated. So too with a kli, achanami haina revisa. Tanya de Messiah. I'll bring you a parisa to support the way you said. It's called Asheretz HaSharetz Al Haaretz. The Rabbos Yavchushin Shesininan. These are insects that were in wine, and you poured it through a sieve to filter them out. These are flying things, so they flew from the ground into the wine. So therefore, there is a prohibition of eating them. Taima desinina. The reason l'chora the Gemara is medayik because you filtered it. Haloisin, and if you haven't filtered, it should be. So once they are removed from that kli onto any surface, there's going to be a prohibition. Amar Shmuel. Kishus shehitlia. You have a cucumber, and there's worms in the cucumber. And beibeha, and the cucumber is still attached to the ground. Asur mishum asheretz hashoretz haaretz. Even though the worm is in a fruit or a vegetable, if it's attached to the ground, it's as if the insect has crawled on the ground. And therefore, you're over the prohibition of hasheretz hashoretz haaretz. Lema Messiahle. Let us say that the following supports this din of Shmuel. The Tani Chada, Al Haaretz, Lahotzi Asazizin Shibadashim. If you have worms in lentil beans that are not attached to the ground, Vesayitushin Beklesim, or gnats that are in chickpeas, worms that are in dates or figs. So these are not prohibited. They were never on the ground. They grew in the fruit themselves. Vitanya idich, kol asher tzasharetz haaretz l'rabbos toila shebi kori zeisim shebi kori gafonim. This includes, in the prohibition, worms that grew in roots of olives or roots of grapes. Now, they didn't creep on the ground, they only crept in the roots. Isn't it considered my love, Aida beperi? Isn't it both considered that they're in the fruit? The only reason why one is permitted, one is prohibited, habi ibeha. One is, if it's still attached to the ground, it would be v'hashalobi ibeha. So the Gemara says, no, that's not a good proof. Both are attached. When the insect are in the fruit, the worm, as long as it hasn't emerged into the world, it's considered part of the fruit. Habil nagufa. But if they're in the roots of the tree, so that's as if it's in the tree itself, and the tree is part of the ground. Dekanami diktani toila should be ikori zesim. There should be ikori gefonim. The emphasis is on the roots. Shema mina, that they're forbidden because they developed in the trees and not in the fruit. Boy, Rav Yosef. So, if the worm comes out of the fruit, pirsha umesa, it does before it gets to the ground, it dies. Is it considered miksosamo? Only part of the worm emerged. Or la'avir ha'olamau. It just merged into the air, but not to the ground. Teku. Boiravashi. Legag tmoramau. The worm moved from the date to the top of the date. Or legag garinusumau. Or to the pit. Or mitmar l'tmoramau. It went from one date to another. And it never came out. Again, the Gemara says Teku. Or Rav Sheshes Brei Ravidi. Kukyanai asiri. These are worms that are found in livers and lungs. So these are prohibited. My time and almasu. The Gemara understands that they came into the animal from outside. They didn't grow inside the animal. Since they came from outside, they're considered like sheretz hasharetz la'aretz. Maski floravashi. Ima almasu lishtabku derech besarei. You should find them in the digestive tract of the animal. Must be, they did grow in the animal, and they never crept on the ground. Ikidiyami, Amrav, Shisha Ravidi, Kukyani Sharu. They're permitted. Why? My time, I mean, no gav, because they grew in the animal. Aravashi pshita, the imam kasu. If they came from the outside world, we would see them in the intestines. However, hilchasa kukyunoi asiri. The halacha is these liver or lung worms are prohibited. My time, mainim naim v'alebi osya. They did come from the outside, but they come through the nose. And there they can't go to the lung and the liver. Toiloim, worms, darni de bisra siri. If the larvae are found in the meat, they're prohibited even if they never crept on the ground. These are under the skin. The kavri sharyan, however, these types of larvae in fish are permitted. The Gemara will explain why. Bring me these fish that have worms and mix it up for me. I like it. I will eat it with the fish. Why is it different? The Rabo says sadronim shebebehema. This is a pasuk to include the larvae of these insects that are in the animal. Well, why wouldn't fish be included? No comparison. We are permitted to eat the meat of an animal after shchita. Therefore, anything in the animal can only be permitted through shchita. Hani, midlokam hani lul shchita. The shchita of the animal doesn't do anything for them. They remain prohibited. Aval dogim ba'asifa ba'amamishtari. You don't have to shech fish. You just gather them. So hani ki kagavlim b'terka gavlim. So when they were formed in the fish, they were always permitted. They're not required to have shchita. So therefore you can eat them. Ton rabbanon. Hoylech al gachon. Anything that creeps on its belly is prohibited. Zen nachash refers to the snake. Kol hoylech al gachon. L'rabos hashilshul v'sadoim l'shilshul. It includes the earthworm in the prohibition. Al arba, walks on 4. Ze akrav refers to a scorpion. Kol hoylech l'rabos es a chipusit. It's a beetle. It's also included, beetles have 6 legs, but they only walk on 4 of them. Then marbe raglayim, zenadal, that's the centipede with 100 legs. Ad kol, the rabos is adome v'sadoma ladome. Other worms that are similar to the centipede and others that are similar to that, they're all not kosher. Tanya, Rabbi Yosi ben Drumaskis Oimer, Livyasan Daktorhu. The Leviathan is a kosher fish. It was created on the 5th day of creation. And eventually we're all going to eat it. It's going to be served to tzaddikim ba'olam haba. Shenemar gava fike maginim. So, and tachtav chadude cheresh. They have the maginim are like shields, and underneath it are like pointed things. Afike maginim ala kaskasim shabot. These are the scales. Tachtav chadude cheresh elusan purim shabrechman. These are the fins. So the Leviathan has scales and fins. It's a kosher fish. Hadlach elu trefus, hadlach elu trefus, hadlach elu trefus. It's an important parak we just learned. Elu Trefus. It's like Elu Metzias.
Yeah.
Kol Shah. It's one of the, like Klal Gadol and Shabbos. It's one of the prakim. Okay, tomorrow